Eastern region's economy was planned by U.S. consulting firm Arthur D. Little, which worked with leaders like Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Emma Okpara, Sam Otti, Eluwa, and the rest of them. They planned industrial estates and corridors across the East, including Trans-Amadi in Port Harcourt, Aba for light industries, and Umuahia for biotechnology. The region's economy grew at 9.2% from 1958 to 1967, making it one of the fastest growing economies in the world. However, the Civil War truncated this momentum, and the East never recovered. Today, Nigerians depend on oil revenues which were initially negotiated by the Eastern Regional Government on a 50-50 basis with Shell. Despite this history, the Southeast contributions to Nigeria's development are often overlooked. Can the East rise from the ashes of its past and take a pride of place 65 years on? This is the Eastern Eye. I am Alex Obodo. You're welcome to the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments in Eastern Nigeria. Joining me tonight is Abueze Kalu Onoma, a storyteller and cultural curator. Thank you so much, Chief Kalu, for joining me tonight on the Eastern Eye, all the way from the Enyimba City.
Good evening, Alex, and thank you for having me once again. Today, you said we will reflect on 65 years of Eastern region's journey, a story of resilience and brilliance, and I'll tell you, it's an unfinished business. From the palm oil boom, which we will touch upon, to the entrepreneurial spirits and the scares of the Civil War that you've highlighted, and the entrepreneurial spirit of Aba, Onitsha, Nnewi. And then you see what's going on in Enugu. The tech hubs are rising and the East is rising again. But the funny thing is that we shouldn't be talking about Eastern Nigeria as a home of promise. We are tired of promises. We need progress. And tonight, we will be asking ourselves, what have we gained since 1960 and before then, and what have we lost, and what must we reclaim? I guess that should be the challenge before us tonight. Thank you once more for having me.
Good. Okay, so typically now, let's start with what was there before, because we'll look at what was possible. Of course, the intro wouldn't let me to talk about everything that happened in Eastern Nigeria. You had the Obudu Cattle Ranch, where it's meant for resort and holiday. You had Port Harcourt, where you had Mechalin and the rest. So Eastern Nigeria was flourishing. So that template was working until the war happened. And around the time the war was setting in, oil was also coming on board. Is it possible that all these things are connected? You think that the conflict of 1967, apart from the whole thing about the pogrom in the north, do you think that it has something to do with oil?
Well, when you want to analyze a complex system that has failed all attempts at restructuring, like Nigeria, you would have to take all the component parts, not as isolated issues, but as interconnected. And that will help us come up with a sense of what actually is going on. Pre-independence, Eastern region was part of the bigger Southern Nigerian protectorate. And the Britons in 1939 felt they needed to break it up into Western Protectorate and Southern Protectorate, which later became Eastern Nigerian region. And the original idea in 1960, when Nigeria became a federal system, was not just a sense of federalism, but a sense that each region was quite independent. Each region determined what they wanted the pace they wanted to develop and what they wanted to develop. The center was so loose, and the center depended on the regions for its sustenance and for its drive. Even though we would look at the Civil War as the breaking point or where we turned the corner, but the Civil War was just one of those things that was already piling up before it happened. Because one would ask himself, why is it that we ran a region, or we ran a regional system that worked extensively and allowed the northern Nigeria to pile up granite pyramids, did what they could do to survive, and they survived. The western Nigeria did their cocoa and several other things, and they were surviving. And Okpara and his team came up with very brilliant vision for eastern Nigeria, which made them the fastest growing economy, like you've highlighted. Could all these have been broken simply because there was civil war? Okay, let's assume that is so. How come northern Nigeria and western Nigeria could not just continue in the things that really made them cry? But that question, we would, if we have time, go in a little bit more to analyze it. But the fact remains that the war, when it came, eastern Nigeria became brutalized for 30 months. Not just brutalized, the aftermath was famine, displacement, and the marginalization we still see today. So all in all, yes, we lost all that peace, we lost all that vision, we lost all that investment possibilities because the war came. But I have shared with you before, probably in our earlier conversations or privately, that I don't really believe that since 1970, we could just continue blaming the war on what continues to go wrong in eastern Nigeria. We would consider that because there have been several examples in world politics, and there have been several examples out there. In Asia, you look at Japan, it went through a terrible war, but look at where they are now. You look at Europe, look at Germany, and you come to Africa, look at Rwanda, and see what they've been able to do. So when you put all these together, you will understand that it is something that we should be looking inward while we are analyzing what's happening to us from the outside. Thank you.
All right, so let's look inwards for a bit, because since it's clear that not everything is the fault of those on the outside, so let's talk about those on the inside. Is it possible that everything that has happened within the eastern homeland wouldn't be the fault of others? Are there things that were supposed to be done properly around here that haven't been done properly, especially with people saddled with the responsibility of doing those things?
Yeah. First, let's start from the beginning. Okpara was 39 years old when he became the premier of eastern Nigeria. 5 states in the present southeast, excluding Edo and Delta. The rest were under him in South-South. And he ran it with such brilliance, with such team, that if the war never happened, I don't think we would be having any cause to go holidaying elsewhere rather than holidaying in eastern Nigeria. Which goes to say that I agree with Achebe that the problem with eastern Nigeria, I am paraphrasing, is simply and squarely that of leadership. You ask me, what about marginalization? What about all the things we've been going through? I don't think when Okpara had the saddle, when Okpara was in control, that eastern Nigeria didn't have problem. We had the challenge of how to develop our palm oil. We had the challenge of developing the coal that became ours when Britain left. We had the challenge of setting up tech and trade hubs, Onitsha, Aba, Newe, all sorts of places. And we had the challenge of building industries, which were directly attached to all these agricultural produces, so that we were not just producing and exporting, we were adding value. Then you ask yourself, how many monthly allocations was Okpara getting? You would know where I am going with that line of thought. So Okpara had the opportunity, and he grabbed the opportunity and was able not just to do all the things he did, but he was able to first feed the people. You know, if you recall his famous speech, you feed the people, you educate the people, and you make sure they are healthy. And then the rest, they will take care of it. That was Okpara's mantra. He fed the population of Eastern Nigeria, never depended on external sources, but he depended on what was coming out of there. And he started adding value to almost everything that we had. There was lots of improvement. But today, we still cry marginalization. We complain about no money. And then let me just shock you. I drove a few hours ago from Mbise, from Abombise to Umuahia. That road from Abombise through Ahira Junction to Umuahia was a very horrible part and patch of real estate. But I drove from Mbise to that junction before I turned right heading to Umuahia. It took me barely 10 minutes. I was screaming in the car. So all this while, these guys can do this, but they purposely refuse to do it. I was asking myself, what changed? What happened? That they could have fixed that road, no pothole, no gallop, no problem. And I looked on both sides of the road were solar power energy. You could see now that it is not a question of Abuja coming to do this. It was a question of those who were saddled with the responsibility of fixing our roads, who have failed to do exactly why we asked them to go do the job. So if at 39 years old, Okpara, who had no primary education on leadership and growing such massive landscape, what has happened to these people who are managing 5 petty states in Okpara standard? So you look at it now and you understand that sometimes we look outside and push the blame to those who are marginalizing us, but we barely talk about the marginalization that is self-inflicted. Post-war, we became a declining environment. Our infrastructures, which were set up under Okpara, could not just be held together. Infrastructures began to decline, and at a point, they were all gone. Broda is gone, Goldie Guinea is gone, glass industry is gone, ceramics is gone. Just name it, you have it. The coal that we have in abundance, we can't even develop. We complain of lack of federal investment. We should complain. We should talk about it. But what progress are we making internally? Industrial capacity has been stunted beyond reasonable doubt. But here too, the irony of the Southeast, irony of Eastern Nigeria, that here is where we have the utmost index of capacity that could lift up this place and lift up other places. But rather than policies, we keep talking about promises. We need policies, and that's exactly what is going to fix Eastern Nigeria, and not the blame game that we continue throwing about.
All right. So now that you've referenced coal, let's talk about coal before we go to palm oil. Coal used to be one of the mainstays. I mean, it was being mined from here. and the sulfur content of the coal from Enugu especially is very low. So, and a lot of countries of the world who have coal-powered plants are still powering them with coal. So what happened to coal? Did Nigeria happen to the coal industry, or was it a conspiracy to suppress Eastern Nigeria?
Well, it's both ways. We are suppressing ourselves, and Nigeria is doing what they have to do. But I have always been a forward-looking person. I don't think the Southeast needs pity. We need policy. The region has a lot of minds, a lot of good brains that could develop all these things. I don't think we should continue looking at the center the way we've looked at it. Now that we know that all the gold in the north, all the mineral resources in the north are being mined officially and unofficially, I don't see anything that stops us from reviewing whatever is in our documents that says we should pretend we have coal and then pretend we cannot develop it. We should not be begging for relief funds. We should be building it. That's what the South is. That's what the Eastern Nigeria has always been about. We survived the war. We survived neglect. We survived exclusion. What we now need from Nigeria is not pity, but inclusion. And when they include us, they invest. And if they cannot invest, we should do the investment. And we need visionary people that should be able to come out and then organize these things. Now, you're talking about coal. What about the excessive reserve of natural gas in the Anambra Basin, in the Imo Basin? And all these are not talked about. All these are not even in discussions. Nobody is talking about it. So I go back to the coal that you talked about. I think Eastern Nigeria should go away completely from all these newspaper adverts, all these blame games, all this crying, and put their heads together and ask one critical question. Where do we want to be tomorrow? I'm not talking about 10 years, 5 years. Where do we want to be tomorrow? It is already a proven fact that what we have as resources, whether we are landlocked or not landlocked, like people will put up the argument, is sufficient enough to make us the darling, the bride that everybody will want to come to. So I really don't see a reason why the coal should remain the way it is. The infrastructures are there. We need to improve them. We need to upgrade them. We need to review. And of course, we need to put them back on the front burner. I believe the future is ours, but we are the ones to shape that future. It is not about, I sent you something yesterday, and I wrote that thing with pain. And what I actually believe is that what Nigeria is doing, Nigeria will continue to do. Nigeria knows no other thing to do. But what Eastern Nigeria is doing to itself, Eastern Nigeria can turn the corner and say, thus far no more. We are going to start developing. That's the kind of language that is going to rebuild our broken homes.
Let's talk about palm oil. I've heard the story a lot of times that Indonesia came here to take palm seedlings. And today we're importing palm oil from Indonesia. So what happened really? Like we say around here, what is it really?
Well, it's a great question. Very great question. If you look at present-day Anambra and Ebonyi states, they are scratching at the margins of agriculture and infrastructure. But we need every single one of us to begin to scratch. Because this idea of unwholesome dependence on the north for our produces and our food is very unlike us, very unbecoming of us. So what happened was that, yes, Malaysia did take palm seedlings And today, Malaysia is high up there in terms of production and export and adding value to the same product that they took from us. But lack of leadership, laziness of leadership, lack of vision of the leaders, both at the national and at the regional level, has become so myopic that these things mean nothing to them. As long as there's oil money to share, nobody thinks about adding value to anything. And that is very wrong, extremely very wrong. So without federal support, with poor roads and power outages and insecurity that we see, we need our regional leaders to improve, to rise up. But we need national equity to be able to do that. And if we don't get national equity, we can't be able to restore all these things. Nigeria finds it very...
All right, we'll take a very quick break here on the Eastern Eye. When we return, we'll try to reconnect with Chief Kalu Onuma. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments in Eastern Nigeria. My name is Alex but I still have on the line from Aba, Chief Kalu Onuma. Thank you so much for staying tuned, sir. And we were talking about palm oil, and you referenced the value chain in Malaysia. So are we unmindful of the value chain that Malaysia has developed in the way we handle, we call it Imaku or Izoaku? I mean, I don't know how you say it in your dialect, but I still see people, they still stand on top of the whole thing to stamp on it to produce palm oil. But they have moved on from that. Why are we not moving on from that? And are we having new palm plantations around here?
I said, when Okpara started this, he established over 40 farm settlements across the region to promote cooperative farming. That we know. And he set up agro-industrial linkages that connected agriculture to industry by setting up all the processing plants that you talked about for palm oil, for rice, for cassava. These things were done systematically because he understood, and he and his team understood, that all these will tag together to make them what they were. And again, all the monies they were making, all the inflow was coming from all these setups, agriculture, value-added chains, and all that and all that. And it made Eastern Nigeria become a major exporter of farm produces, earning foreign exchanges and feeding its population. It was not dependent on any center to do that. Now, what we are extraying is suddenly there was a break. The war, big reason why there was that break. But it's like we pressed the remote and we stopped at that point. How come people who were so creative, how come people who were so visionary, who could do all this between 1960 and 1967, could suddenly, after the war, which lasted for 3 years, become so impoverished? It is a sad thing. So when we look at this, I keep saying the bulk of the problem still lies with us. It doesn't lie with the center. But we already know that the center never loved us. The war, yes, was declared over, but we know the war still goes on. And don't forget, Okpara started the industrialization drive. Eastern Nigerian Development Corporation became the body that spearheaded industrial growth everywhere, investing in manufacturing, textile, agro-processing, just about everything. What do you see today? Which of the states that are left in their reorganized form are investing in anything? Okay, a governor comes in after several years of decay and builds a road that was there before, but upgraded it. Massive thing. A people living in the 21st century begins to react as if they've just been dropped in mass. Isn't that a shame? That is not the Eastern Nigeria that Okpara ran. Major industries, you talked about the one in Port Harcourt, glass factory in Port Harcourt, ceramics in Umuahia, shoe factory in Aba, textile mills in Onitsha. All this happened.
And Niger Sem
Kalago. None of these present-day leaders could not build new ones, but refurbish, reinvest, and regrow. There's a solution, but you have to bite the bullet and be prepared to do the hard job. This is not the job for faint-hearted men. It is not something that you come there to talk grammar, do platitudes. No, you have to fold your sleeves. Public-private partnership. That's the way Eastern Nigeria must go. If you look across Nigeria now, what is happening? Everybody is shouting, Igbo should go, Igbo should go. It is not a crime. But the insincerity behind that, and yet our people are deaf. Heavy investments in Lagos, still we are denied citizenship. Heavy investments in Port Harcourt, heavy investments in Kano, heavy investments in Abuja. Across the entire breadth of Nigeria we are investing, but nothing is coming home. And for so many years, it has become a mantra. Everybody talks about think home, think home, think home. Let's go home. But you do not go home on promises. There must be serious policies made by the Southeast governments, collectively, not individually, that is going to reassure every single investor, whether you are an Igbo investor or whether you are a foreign investor. Investment likes only one language: money, profitability. You don't do investment by talking too much. You have to create the enable environment that is going to attract these people to come and revive this. It is a shame that with all the palm oil that is across the Eastern Nigeria, we are still using mortar and we are still using very crude machinery to produce palm oil. Now, Alex, I'll shock you. A few months ago, just between Easter and where we are now, one of my kid brothers decided he was going to go into the palm oil business. He started going around in all the interior villages where they produce this thing. But you know what? He couldn't buy, not because there was no oil. He was shocked and he was told that they've been paid some years ahead by northern investors and by Indian investors. Could you believe that? Producing with crude machines to sell outside. That is why you walk into the market in your neighborhood, palm oil, a bottle, they will be telling you for static money. And you look through your window and you are seeing palm fronds and palm trees everywhere because there's no cohesion, no planning, nothing is being done. And that's why I said when we started this thing, it is simply and squarely a question of leadership, nothing else. Make policies, bring in infrastructures, and investors will come running for you.
I mean,
Thank you.
Now that you've referenced a few moribund assets that are still within the eastern region, it looks like the Niger Sem might be the biggest. I might be wrong, but Niger Sem might be the largest piece of asset that eastern Nigeria had that is just lying decrepit. A lot of talk around who should own it, who had owned it, and who will own it. So that factory, cement factory, is sitting on one of the best limestone sources in the land, in Kalago. What went wrong? What went wrong with Niger?
In Africa, as a matter of, you see, I don't know the politics around it. But I'll tell you that I had this uncle of mine in the 70s who was the chief accountant of Niger Sem Kalago. And we enjoyed going to holidays there. It's like you were dropped in the middle of a European quarter anywhere in the world. And the standard was very high, even for the most junior of staffs. They were well taken care of. The place was so well organized, and they were making money, and they were doing business. Now, what went wrong? Again, the war happened. The politics around it, I will confess to you, I've really not followed. But whatever the politics is, I believe there is a lot of money, over 1 billion lifetimes, in Igbo hands today that can set up a parallel one if the politics around the present one is too high. They can start small, they can start setting up, let it be cottage ones, but you can't have this amount of resources and every month you go cap in hand collecting money from Abuja. The fact of it is that going cap in hand collecting money from Abuja is already an indictment on yourself, because you have some things under your foot and you are not making use of it. There is a proverb in Abriba we say, "Ibure yishi gebro Okpara akpantente." In other words, you are carrying an elephant in your head and you are too stingy and too greedy using your leg to collect the termite that is on the ground. I mean, look at it that way. You have all these deposits, coal, limestones, salt, name it, you have it.
Natural gas.
You're not developing it. You're not investing in it. You're not discussing it. It's not bothering you. You're waiting for the end of month. You send your accountant general to go collect. My God, something is wrong. Okpara, Azikiwe, and the rest of them will be turning in their graves. Because with the little they had, they expanded our schools. They built hundreds of primary and secondary schools. Don't forget, you are talking about fastest growing economy. We became the hub of education. Education became the primary thing. Look around. If you look at your village, you will see in almost every village, they were encouraged to build. It was a competition between one little village and another.
That's
the
correct.
Ones that will be able to build a community school.
So, yeah.
And after building it, taxing even women that go to farm, now they produce the generation that can barely buy a chair for those schools. What are we talking? Is it Abuja that is telling us not to refurbish these schools that were built by the sweat of our mothers and grandmothers? It is terrible and horrible. And then outside that, there was a competition on who is going to produce the first school sat leaver, the first graduate, the healthy competition across the Southeast. And then look at UNN. UNN was set up by Azikiwe. Okpara took it upon himself, supported it, and ensured it became a hub of research and innovation. Under Okpara, UNN took off. The war was what brought the collapse, or the beginning of the collapse. And there was scholarship programs. All this, don't forget, is coming from rice, it's coming from oil, and it is coming from the little tech hubs, value-added chains across everywhere. What are we really talking about? So, if Okpara at 39 years old could do all this, and we have people who have read and claim to be whatever they are, and their states cannot even enjoy very basic amenities to make people function and survive. So it's sad, very sad. I'll go back to your limestone. I don't know the politics, but I believe that there is $1 billion value chain, money everywhere that we could bring in and start developing these things in small bits. Because if we see it as essential and consequential, we are going to be able to do that. But we don't see it as if it is so. Everybody for himself, that's the language that has become very rampant in the Southeast. And it's a tragedy, very serious tragedy.
All right, you talked about PPP, private-public partnership.
Yes.
But it doesn't look like there's a lot of partnership among the Southeast governors. I've asked this question a number of times on this platform. How many times have we seen a meeting of the Southeast Governors Forum? Or is the forum no longer a forum? Is it safe to say now that, okay, everyone should go and develop their areas since the creation of Southeast Development Commission. So should the Southeast Development Commission be the fulcrum and hub for Southeast integration?
I asked myself this question, and I'm asking it loud now, both for yourself and for whosoever is viewing this. Do the governors outside their states see the Southeast as their homeland? Or do they see their states as their homeland? Because if the Southeast is a challenge for them, they will come up with a solution. If the Southeast becomes something that bothers them to the point of sleeplessness, they will come up with a solution. But because their major problem is to survive politically, that is why the sticking point where they think regional power, regional cohesion, regional development, that's where it comes in. But because they don't think in that light, that's why it's just there. Southeast Governors Forum is just there in name. I don't see that structural union, cohesion that leads them to think, plan, and work for development. So again, we cannot talk them into doing what they normally should know they should be doing. Probably there are interconnectedness when there are issues that they feel they need to talk about, which we don't hear in the open. Whether they talk to themselves, I believe they do. I believe there's conversation. But what we are asking is that there should be much more than just that private conversation. There should be an openness that draws in all the best and brightest from each of these states to become a hub where a regional plan has to be developed, followed through, and pursued. The conflict of political interest plays a whole lot of role here. Because everybody wants to survive politically, and to survive politically in Nigeria simply means to continue to become relevant with a position. Because political relevance in other climes does not necessarily mean you must have a portfolio or you must have to sit somewhere. It just means that you are politically active enough to realize that what should come to you comes to you if you do due diligence and plan very well and draw those things to yourself and make sure that where you call your base is really your base. Because these are actually people who claim they have a base, but they are actually baseless. Because that is the thing I keep worrying about. So, in terms of not hearing about the Southeast Governors Forum, yes, we don't hear about it. But all these still boil down to the fact that they collectively, not individual, collectively lack the visionary leadership to take back this region, rebuild this region, and stop going cap in hand to make requests that they know the answer would always be no and no. Okpara was a planner. I barely see a plan on the table. Okpara developed a blueprint that was modeled after the Israel's Igbos. And I am not seeing any of such plan on the table. Okpara developed a system that focused on self-reliance. Where is the self-reliance that is coming? Even in the body language that we see from these people, it's very frightening. Okpara was a pan-Africanist. Don't forget, in the little money that Eastern Nigeria was making, they were Southeast and Eastern Nigeria actually, was supporting a lot of liberation movements. What are they really supporting today? What values are they promoting? What political vision are they putting on the table? I can understand their differences in political parties, but you can understand what political parties in Nigeria represent today. Political parties without any vision, any plan. So when you want to say this is the difference between the left and the right, you don't even know who is on the left, you don't even know who is on the right. And we are not seeing that push to really take us where we need to be. So we have to find a way, get ourselves to the table, and begin to take charge and begin to redevelop. I don't see Nigeria coming to our aid. Not today, not tomorrow, not forever. Not even when we think marginalization has stopped. It will not stop. It will only stop when we decide it will stop. And it stops the day we start developing and start promoting those things that are of importance for us.
That would be a good place to leave it. I have to thank you so much, Chief Kalu Onuma, storyteller and, of course, cultural curator. Thank you for talking to us on the Eastern Eye tonight.
Thank you very much.
That's the Eastern Eye for tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow same time. My name is Alex Obodo. Good night.